to take their seats. All right, as people file in, I want to welcome everyone. For those who I have not met here, my name is Josh Wilson. I'm the president of the Lawyers Chapter here in Philadelphia, the Federalist Society. I'm also a partner in the litigation group at Dilworth-Paxson. I want to thank Drinker Biddle for hosting us tonight, specifically thanks to Tim O'Driscoll, who could not be here tonight, but who did some of the arrangements, and to Andrew Reeve, who's our host here in the room. It's an enormous help and resource to have spaces like this available for us for these events.
A beautiful view.
With a beautiful view, that's right. As many of you know, the Federalist Society for Law and Public Policy Studies is a group of conservatives and libertarians interested in the current state of the legal order. It's founded on the principles that the state exists to preserve freedom, separation of governmental powers is central to our Constitution, and that it's emphatically the province and duty of the judiciary to say what the law is, not what it should be. The Federalist Society's membership is composed of law students, lawyers, faculty, public policy experts, judges, and others dedicated to preserving these principles. It has over 300 chapters nationwide in all 50 states. Our chapter hosts events throughout the year for CLE credit. We're also going to aim to host some other social events during the upcoming year. You can keep an eye on our Facebook page for events. You can also look at the Federalist Society's national site, which is www.fed-soc.org, for a variety of information. There's information about the chapter, but also the podcasts about a variety of topics, Supreme Court issues. The Supreme Court's back in session now. Many other exciting things as well. Also, new to the chapter as of today, the chapter has its own Twitter handle. It is
let me tweet him. What is it?
At PhilaFedSoc, PhilaFedSoc. So we're going to make some effort to keep that populated with tweets, both from National Federalist Society, other sources during the course of the day. And if anybody sees anything interesting, please feel free to tweet it at us so that we can retweet it. A few quick housekeeping items before I introduce our speaker. Chapter organization, obviously, as many of you know, this is my first event in my position as chapter president, trying to fill the shoes of Judge Sirota, who's standing in the back hovering over me. And so to that end, if anyone has ideas for events, speakers, topics that we should be taking up, please let me know. You can come up to me at any of these events. You can email me, call me, whatever it is. For those of you who might be willing to captain an event, I'd certainly appreciate the volunteers. And if anyone knows people who are in town, particularly at other law firms, who might be interested in some of our presentations and who are not getting our messages, please let them know to reach out to us. Please let us know, and we can try to reach out to them. Certainly, we're always looking for other interested members to enhance our lively debate. One other note, the Lawyers Convention, Federalist Society National Lawyers Convention, will be taking place November 12th through 14th this year in Washington, D.C. If anyone's interested in registering, I believe pre-registration is still open with early registration discounts on the National Federalist Society website. It is always an impressive conference, really good CLE programs, good chance to meet and talk to people from around the country. And if you are going, please let me know, and we can let National know and assemble either a table or a half a table for the national dinner rather than being scattered through the room as we have been in the past. CLE credit forms, everybody should have gotten them as they came in tonight. Please make sure you fill them out, turn them in, either leave them at the table out there or give them to me. And a pitch for membership in the Federalist Society. I think most of the people here are members. If you're not, or if your membership has lapsed and you're not sure that you want to re-sign, let me just encourage you to do so. You get discounted discounted opportunities to attend events like these. The brochures are outside. You will very quickly make up your money as we have events throughout the course of the year. So with that, let me very quickly introduce our speaker, Josh Blackmun. Josh is a professor at South Texas College of Law. He is an incredibly entertaining speaker. His focus is on constitutional law and the Supreme Court and the intersection of law and technology. And he is a graduate both of Penn State and then of the George Mason School of Law. He's going to be speaking to us tonight about the First Amendment, Second Amendment, and 3D printed guns. And with that, I'll turn it over to Josh. Thanks.
Josh, thank you. All right, hi everyone. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be back in Philadelphia. I grew up in Staten Island. I went to college at Penn State. I clerked for 2 years in the Western District of Pennsylvania in Johnstown, so this feels pretty close to home, and I'm very gracious that Josh and Judd and all my good friends are here for the event tonight. Well, first of all, happy first Monday. Today is the first Monday in October. It is the start of the Supreme Court's term, so hopefully everyone enjoyed the case. There were 2 very boring cases today, but this term will heat up very, very soon. So today you have a treat, not 1 constitutional right, but 2 constitutional rights. The debate will discuss whether the First and Second Amendments protect a right to 3D printed guns. And I should note at the outset, Josh, that I am not just a law professor, I'm actually a lawyer. I am currently litigating a case involving 3D printed guns. We are on appeal to the Fifth Circuit, and we lost in the district court, but I will get there in a moment. So we will hopefully have a much better go around the courts of appeals. So first of all, 3D printing, right? 3D printing involves something called CAD, computer-aided design. The same way that you can draw a picture on a piece of paper, you can draw a picture on a computer. And rather than that picture having only 2 dimensions, length and width, you can also have dimensions that have 3 dimensions. So you can design something as sophisticated as a house or even a car on a computer using an entirely 3D design. And the way you design something using 3D printing is with words. The same way if I were to describe to you, draw a square with a length of 5 and a width of 5, right? You would know exactly what to do. Or if I said draw a cube with a length of 5, a width of 5, and a depth of 5, you would know exactly what to do. 3D printing works in the exact same way. So to use an example, ooh, my laser pointer works here, but it doesn't work on this fancy TV screen. Okay, so I should upgrade. Okay, so the same way that you can use words to define an object, let's think back to our high school geometry for a moment, right? Ever remember the formula for the volume of a cylinder? Of course we do, right? You need to know the height and you need to know the radius of the circle. So if I told you of a cylinder with a height of 20 and a radius of 5, you would know it looks roughly like that. This is how 3D printing operates. You use very simple words and numbers to describe an object. The same way I would draw an object on a piece of paper, I can use words to describe it. Okay, so why am I telling you all this? Why would you even care how 3D printed works? Because this is speech. That is speech, and speech is protected by the First Amendment. And the government's power to censor the speech is unconstitutional, okay? So what can you do with this 3D printing, right? You can make cylinders, but you make lots of little tchotchkes. You can make little glasses or little balls or whatever else you want. But this technology can get very sophisticated. You can make very elaborate objects entirely out of a computer without lifting a finger and having to chisel anything by hand. So this is what a 3D printer looks like. You can see here they're making, oh, I think it doesn't work. You see they're making a race car, okay? How does this actually work? And the easiest way to explain how a 3D printer works is by explaining how to make a candle. Has anyone made a candle before, right? You take a wick and you dip it in the wax, right? You lift it up, you dip it in the wax. And you keep dipping the wick into the wax. And each time you dip it, the base gets thicker and thicker and thicker because you're applying another thin layer of wax onto the wick. Right, everyone follow me? This is exactly how 3D printing works. But instead of dipping something in wax, what actually happens is that the 3D printer has a very, very fine nozzle. And it spits out a very small layer of plastic. The same way your printer at home can spit out a very small layer of ink onto the paper, like an inkjet printer, the 3D printer spits out a very small layer of plastic. And what happens is after it lays down a piece of plastic, it moves up a little bit. and puts another piece of plastic, and then moves up and puts another piece of plastic. And by layering one piece of plastic on top of another, you can actually create an object. All right. So I'm going to show you a demonstration on the computer, at least, of how 3D printing operates. And what you'll see is this little nozzle right there. See a little tip right there? That's what lays down a little bit of green plastic. And this will actually be creating an object, which many of you in the room should recognize. Okay, I want to show it frame by frame until we get to the point where you recognize what's being created. Okay, so the first layer is kind of this honeycomb-shaped lattice. It's a very strong thing. The bees are smart. They know what they're doing. Honeycombs are used because they're very strong and durable. So you have a little thin layer of plastic. Okay, and you see that layer of plastic gets a little bit thicker. Put more and more green stuff on top of it. And you put more and more green plastic on top. And another layer. And another layer. This is about 10% done, right? And another layer. Stop me if you see what it is. Okay? What is it? Okay. Another layer. Okay. And you see it's actually very sophisticated, the contouring. The same way you could sculpt with a chisel on a piece of stone or clay, it makes very elaborate designs. Anybody see it yet? What? Oh, I wish. No, it's not James Madison. I wish we could. I actually 3D printed. Close. I actually printed a Supreme Court at a 3D printer at home. It's really cool. Anyone see it now? Oh. Anyone see it now? Oh. Who is it? What's his name? Yoda. Winner in the front, right? Oh, did you say in the back? I'm sorry. Okay. Does everyone see it? It's Jedi, the Jedi. Yoda, the Jedi Knight. And you can see here, everyone see it now, right? And just by using just a very thin layer of plastic in about 20 or 30 minutes, you can create a perfect replica of the character, one at a time. One at a time, one at a time. Now his head's topped off. It's a remarkable technology, and you can use it to make some pretty cool things, right? You can make objects that you wouldn't even think could be possible using only a thin layer of plastic, but you have these interlocking gears, and this thing actually works. So what do you think the first thing is that people want to build when 3D printing comes out? What's the first thing people want to build? Close. What else?
Coins.
No, not coins. What else? Come on, this is America. You guys in Philadelphia, it's kind of America, right? Guns, yes, of course, right? So because this is America, and because we have the right to bear arms, people love their freedoms, one of the first objects that was popularly conceived of was a gun. The reason why is simple. You have to go through the government to buy a gun. Now, you can make your own. Okay, so the first gun was something called the aptly named Liberator. Okay, by the way, are there any non-US persons in the room? Any non-citizens? Okay, good. I gave a talk recently where there were. This piece of information, actually, as I'll get to later, is something called ITAR controlled. I am not allowed to show this to any non-US persons under the government's perspective. I'll cut back this in a minute. I'm glad they're no, I wouldn't actually ask you to leave, but I think that law is unconstitutional. I'm challenging in court. So this is Cody Wilson. Cody is my client. Cody was a first-year law student at the University of Texas at Austin. He didn't finish. Midway through his first year, he gained international acclaim by designing a 3D printed gun on the computer. Cody is a self-professed anarchist in every single manner. He will tell you that very personally. I actually did a discussion with him a couple of days ago at UT Austin, and it was very enjoyable. Okay, but I'll get to the suit in a second. So what did Cody design? He designed a lot of things. So first, he designed what's called an AR-15 lower receiver. Does anyone know what that is? Basically, an AR-15 is the most popular semi-automatic rifle in the country. The only part of that gun that's actually regulated is this piece of metal called the lower receiver, which is basically the frame of the gun. This is the only thing that you need the government's permission to use. Cody managed to print one printer, and was able to handle hundreds of shots, thousands even. This was one of his first inventions. One of his second inventions was, see that white thing right there? It was a magazine where you put bullets for an AR-15. He called it the Cuomo, after the governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who attempted to ban these devices. Cody has a sense of humor. In fact, one of his favorite devices is something called a Dirty Diane, named after Dianne Feinstein. I won't even tell you what that does. But Cody gained the most notoriety by designing this object. What the heck is that, right? If you just saw those pieces strewn out, maybe you'd recognize that, well, that's a bullet, right? And, well, that's a nail. But what the heck is the rest of that? Those 19 or so pieces form a fully functioning handgun, made entirely out of 3D printed materials, with the exception of, again, the bullet and the nail. So how does this work? Okay, this is what the Liberator looks like when it's fully assembled. In fact, it's currently on permanent display in a museum in London. It's a beautiful piece of art. And Cody went through many rounds of testing with it before he actually put it in his hand. In fact, the first go-around is that he attached a string to the trigger and stood about 10 feet away to try and pull the trigger, because it could, blow up in his hand. So Cody was actually fairly careful on that front. But eventually he did enough testing so that he was able to pull the trigger himself. Now, this is a single shot pistol. It fits one bullet at a time. It is not particularly dangerous. It's a very small caliber round. So, what's the problem? Okay. Is there anything illegal with Cody printing and using his own 3D gun? And the answer is not this. Okay. When I talk about 3D printed guns, this is the image people come to think of, right? You push a button and a Glock pistol pops out, ready to fire, ready to go. My friends, this is not the case. This is not how this technology works. But even more importantly, okay, Cody didn't really do anything new. So has anyone ever heard of a zip gun? Okay, what's a zip gun?
A homemade gun.
Yeah.
Really poor quality.
Like this, right? Okay. So this may surprise you. And I grew up in New York City. I didn't touch a gun until I was nearly 21 years old, right? My parents even let me have toy guns, which probably explains a lot of my interest now, right? So a zip gun is a homemade gun that you can make using stuff you'll find at the hardware store. This gun, a garden hose nozzle, and a soldering gun, okay? I can go to the hardware store for 10 bucks and buy everything I need to make a gun. Very, very easy to build. This is another type of a zip gun. You ever see those little keychain flashlights, right? You can make that into a gun very easily. It has a metal barrel. If you put enough pressure to the back of a bullet, it goes boom, okay? Why am I showing you all these pictures? Because making a gun for yourself is not new. There's absolutely nothing novel about that. Cody is just doing it in a novel manner. So let me show you a video of some idiots, okay? You'll see why they're idiots in a moment. Please do not try this at home. We don't need any tort lawyers chasing us down the ambulance, right? Do not try this at home. So this genius is trying to make a rifle out of a piece of rubber tubing, a metal pipe, and a shotgun shell. That is all you need to make a gun, okay? How? The tip of this metal pipe has that little dimple. This is going to be used as a firing pin. And for those of you who don't know how a gun works, you have a bullet. On the back of the bullet is what's called a charge. It's usually gunpowder of some sort. When you puncture the back of the bullet, it creates a spark, boom, charges the ignition, and it projects out the bullet going forward, right? That's why you have to pierce the back of a bullet, and the projectile comes out. So this genius wants to use the back of this pipe to pierce the back of a shotgun shell. So here's what he does. He loads the shotgun shell into the rubber tubing, okay? What he's going to do is jam the back of this pipe into the shotgun shell. Now, I see you're shaking your head. You'll shake your head a lot more in a second. Everyone see this?
Oh my God.
That's what we call an electrical outlet, okay? And you see these holes on the box? He's done this before. So this idiot, if I can say for the this schmuck, okay? He is about to fire a shotgun right near an electrical outlet. And the cable is dangling, okay? So here's the before. By the way, so you see the fan is plugged in right by the outlet? So he's about to go like this, right? What do you think happens?
Do you have fingers left?
Boom.
Is this a Darwin Award?
This guy should get a Darwin Award. Yes, I think he should be a Darwin Award finalist, but he survived, so he doesn't win the award. So basically, and you can see the electric outlet very clearly right there with the cable coming down, right? But he shoots it. And you can see he's so proud of himself with this, you know, the smoking cartridge, right? Why am I showing you this picture? Why am I showing you this idiot? Okay? Lawyers in the room. Did he break any law? No, at least no federal law. Under the rules of the Division of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearm, our favorite convenience store, there's absolutely nothing that he did that is unlawful, okay? You are allowed, with certain exceptions, to make your own gun for your own use. So long as you don't sell it, you do not need the government's permission. If you make an automatic weapon or certain other types of missile launchers, there are rules against that. But a handgun or a rifle, you can perfectly make that in your garage. You can be an idiot and you can shoot at an electrical outlet, and you've broken no law. So then what's the problem with what Cody's doing, right? If Cody's merely using, instead of rubber tubing and a metal pipe, he's using a 3D printer, is there anything novel about this? Is there anything new, okay? And the short answer is no, okay? But not only is what Cody doing not illegal, I argue, and as his lawyer I have to, although in fairness, the article in your CLE materials are in the Tennessee Law Review. I wrote that a year before I was retained, so I actually held this position before I was getting paid. Now I'm getting paid very low bono. It's not a high rate. I'm doing this because I love it. I'm passionate about the case. It's a public interest case in all respects. Although I hope one day to get a check from the Department of Justice paying me back for my fees, but we'll see if that ever happens, okay? But I argue, both in my article and in briefs on behalf of Mr. Wilson, that the Constitution protects his activities, okay? Why? First of all, we have the First Amendment. I showed you at the outset of this discussion what 3D printed code looks like. I promise there's a reason why I bothered you with that, right? Cody is an artist. He designs these guns. These guns are on display in museums. He designs this using a computer program to visualize on the screen. Remember I showed you that barrel on the screen? That is an artistic expression, and it's a very beautiful image if you ask me, okay? This First Amendment protects speech in all manners. Okay, the Supreme Court held a couple of years ago in Brown versus Electronic Merchants Association that a violent video game, which is something within code, is protected by the Constitution, okay? This is a baseline we have to start from. The mere fact that you choose to express yourself on a computer rather than on a piece of paper or a canvas does not deprive it of First Amendment value. Because after all, what we have here is a prior restraint to speech. The government is trying to censor Cody from putting on the internet information that could be used to make a 3D printed gun, right? But wait a minute, Josh, this is dangerous, right? You can use this information to go make a gun and shoot up a school, or I don't know, do whatever you're going to do with a gun, right? Well, I have a discussion for you. Who here remembers the Anarchist Cookbook? Right? Anyone have a copy? Oh, you're a good Republican lawyers, right? You wouldn't have one. But the Anarchist Cookbook was a book that was very popular during the 60s and 70s, and it was used by, if I may, hippies to blow stuff up, right? If you actually bought a copy of this book, you would find instructions of how to kill people, how to make poison gas, how to make pipe bombs, how to engage in various guerrilla techniques and hold hostages, right? There's some pretty dangerous stuff in this book. Can the government censor it and not let you buy it, right? Before there was Amazon, there were bookstores. These things existed, I promise, right? And if you went to a bookstore, could the government say, you cannot sell this book? And the courts consistently said, no. The mere fact that this speech, this book, may be used to facilitate crimes does not deprive it of any First Amendment value. And this is an important thing to recognize. The mere fact that our liberty may be dangerous does not let the government take it away. Lots of our freedoms are dangerous. And the mere fact they can use freedom to hurt someone else doesn't give the government a license to suppress it, especially when we're talking about speech. But wait a minute, Josh, what about, we're not talking about any kind of like a, book or magazine or newspaper. We're talking about code, right? Is code speech? Is computer code speech? And here I think the court has actually suggested the answer is yes, right? The First Amendment's not just about protecting speech, but they've held it's about protecting information. Information and data, the creation, dissemination thereof, is speech. This is a case called Sorrell v. IMS Health. It was a Supreme Court decision from 2011. So what we have here is Cody Wilson using a computer to design a blueprint for a gun, to design a specification for a gun. And this is the sort of speech that the government is seeking to suppress. So I think there are serious, serious First Amendment issues with this sort of analysis. Okay? But as I said at the outset, you get not only one, but two constitutional rights, right? We also have to contend with the Second Amendment, right? We all know, and if we haven't studied this, we ought to. A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Okay? What does this right mean? Well, in a case called District of Columbia versus Heller, a 2008 decision, the Supreme Court held that the District of Columbia could not prevent Mr. Heller from owning a handgun. Now, actually, Mr. Heller's lead counsel, a guy named Alan Gura, he's my co-counsel on this case. We are litigating this case together. So as you can tell, we have some pretty big guns, no pun intended. Okay? 3 years after McDonald, we had a case involving Otis McDonald. Otis had the same situation as Mr. Heller. He lived in Chicago in a very rough and tumble neighborhood. He wanted a handgun to defend himself and his family. City of Chicago said, no, you can't, or we have too much crime, so you can't defend yourself. Okay? Case went to Supreme Court, and this is a cool picture of Mr. Heller and Mr. McDonald. In the same fashion that Mr. Heller won, the Supreme Court extended the right to bear arms to the states in McDonald v. City of Chicago. I should pause to note Mr. McDonald died in the last year. He was a really great man, and he fought for civil rights. Not what you think of as a civil right, but it ought to be. And we should think fondly of Mr. McDonald. So, but wait a minute, Josh. They've only said you have the right to keep a gun in their house. How the heck does that mean you have the right to make a gun on your 3D printer, right? So here we have to do a little bit of understanding of the court's decision. And I think to have a meaningful Second Amendment, there has to be something called a right to acquire arms, right? Why is there a right to acquire arms? Imagine the government said this: you can have a gun in your house, you just can't buy any new ones. Wait a minute, what if I was just born? What if I moved? Oh, you can't get a new one. A necessary consequence of bearing arms is getting it from somewhere, acquiring it from somewhere. For example, Dick Heller had guns in his home from the 1970s, but he had to get them locked up. But after Heller, he got a license, and now he was able to go and buy a new gun. So I humbly submit that actually the right to bear arms includes a right to acquire new arms. Now, I am not saying, and don't quote me on this, I am not saying that the government can't regulate the sale of arms. The government has power to regulate commerce, and they can regulate it. But that's against the backdrop of the Second Amendment. They cannot prohibit the acquisition of arms. Okay? But even more pressingly than the right to acquire arms is what I call a right to make arms. And this one's actually a very important principle. In our history, in our tradition, going back to 1776, we were, God, I'm in Philadelphia, Lord. I love using this line. I'm actually in the city, the cradle of liberty, as it were. When our country declared independence, we didn't have Cabela's, right? We didn't have Walmart. If we wanted to make a gun, we made it ourselves. And this tradition goes all the way back to the founding. We had the militiamen making their own muskets, polishing their own muskets. Has anyone seen the John Adams miniseries on HBO a couple years ago? It's a great, great movie. If you haven't seen it, go watch it. And there's this one scene that really touches me in the heart, where as the militiamen are mustering, Abigail Adams is pouring molten lead and making musket balls, so the troops can have something to pick off the Brits with. And I love doing this in Philadelphia of all cities. We have a tradition going back 200 years in our country of making our own guns and making our own arms and making our own ammunition, right? To the extent that our constitutional rights are informed by tradition, I do think they are. This one is a very, very strong case that we have a deeply rooted right to make our own arms to fit our own needs. And if I want to make a gun with certain specifications, whether I do it in my garage like those idiots, or I make an actual smart gun using a 3D printer that meets my needs, I mean, imagine for disability. And say you can't use your trigger finger, right? Maybe you're missing a finger. What if you can use it your thumb? Fire accommodation for people with disabilities. There are lots of reasons why you may want a gun to fit your particular needs. and 3D printing enables that. But back to the constitutional argument. Not only is there a First Amendment argument here, not only is there a Second Amendment argument here, but there's what I call a hybrid argument. And the argument goes something like this. What is the government stopping us from speaking about? Another constitutional right. They are stopping Cody from speaking about his Second Amendment right. So imagine if the government passed a law, Sarah Palin, somewhere saying, you cannot say Merry Christmas against the law. Would that be a First Amendment speech claim? Would that be a First Amendment free exercise claim? Well, I think it's a little bit of both, a little bit of country, a little bit of rock and roll, right? It's actually a hybrid claim because you're censoring another constitutionally protected speech. Or use another example. What if the government prevented you from talking about abortion? Well, I'm sure some people would say that violates both the First and the 14th Amendment due process clause because you can't engage in speech to facilitate abortions. You can run this any number of ways, and the Supreme Court's actually recognized this hybrid right. Okay, so what then is the government actually trying to do, right? So there are a couple approaches by which the government has tried to regulate 3D printed guns, okay? The first is something called the Undetectable Firearms Act, right? The Undetectable Firearms Act, okay? What is this act? It was passed in 1988, and it basically says all guns must have a certain quantity of metal in them. Enough metal to trigger an airport metal detector, magnetometer, okay? The reason why we have this law was a uninformed reaction to the Glock handgun. Now, how many people have a Glock handgun? Oh, none of you? Go try one. They're very good. Okay, they're my personal favorite. But in the movie Die Hard, everyone remember Die Hard with John McClane, played by Bruce Willis? There's just one scene, and I'll do my best, but I don't have nearly the swag of Bruce Willis. He says, you know, luggage. That punk pulled the Glock 7 on me. Okay, you know what that is? It's a porcelain gun made in Germany. It doesn't show up in your airport X-ray machines, and it costs more than what you make in a month. Every single word in that sentence is false. Every word. There is no Glock 7. No such model exists. It's not made of porcelain. It's made out of metal. It's not made in Germany. It's made in Austria. It will show up in an X-ray machine, and it's about $400 to buy one. It's not very expensive. But people freaked out at this movie saying, oh my God, we need to stop these porcelain guns from getting to the airports, right? Imagine what's like a teacup or something, if you shatter, it breaks apart. It's absurd, right? I mean, but this is how, you know, Congress reacts. They react to movies. So they pass this Undetectable Firearm Act. Fine, right? Okay, they have this Undetectable Firearm Act, and the Liberator complies with it. Cody designed the gun so that there's a chunk of metal that fits into the gun. It's soldered in there. It's a permanent fixture to the gun. So it actually complies with this law, okay? The guns. Senator Schumer, my former senator, found a microphone. It wasn't too difficult for him. And he said, we want to ban this, whatever he has the same press conference, ban something else, right? But here he actually wanted to ban 3D printed guns, okay? Easier said than done. How can you ban something that you can make at home, okay? So one proposal, which was very not good, is we ban plastic. Let's ban the, I swear, law professors made these arguments. Let's ban the sale of plastic. That way people can't print 3D guns. Okay, I see you're still laughing because it's a stupid idea, but the reason why it's silly is because this would limit so much that you can make with a 3D printed gun. So many things that are constitutionally protected. But why is this also stupid? You can 3D print steel. This is actually a 1911 handgun made entirely out of 3D printer and steel. You can print with any material you want. So even if you had banned plastic, okay, fine, you can make a 3D printed, you know, 1911 perfectly functioning handgun. I held this in my hand. I didn't fire it, but it's a good gun, solid, good grip, good balance. It's a very solid piece of arms. One of the other proposals was let's ban gunpowder, right? This is people can't shoot. Okay, I'm just going to skip that one because that makes absolutely no sense. But you see the problem. Once the 3D blueprints are out in the ether, you cannot stop people from making it. You can't stop them from having the materials. You can't stop them from having gunpowder. So one other possible approach that can be used to stop 3D printing guns is based on intellectual property law. And there's something called digital rights management. So if anyone remembers the old CDs, if you actually bought a CD, you were not able to put the music onto your iPod because the iPod only allowed songs that were purchased from the iTunes store. Similarly, if you actually buy, anyone use Amazon Kindle? Anyone ever use that? If you actually buy a book on Amazon Kindle, this may surprise you, you don't own it. You only have a license to the book. And this is actually a creepy but true item. At one point, Amazon had a dispute with the publisher of the book 1984. And Amazon remotely deleted the book 1984 from people's Kindle devices. Creepy, huh? You thought you owned a book and then it's gone from your device. So what if we can use these same principles that were used to control the spread of music and movies to control the spread of 3D printing? So there were massive backlash, DRM, digital rights management, for saving music and for authors, right? But one of the next big frontiers is how 3D printing will kill manufacturers. Now, I swear this actually happened. I do not watch Keeping Up with the Kardashians, but there was an episode involving a 3D printing where Kanye West said that 3D printers will destroy the textile industry. Why would anyone buy a $300 pair of sneakers when they can print it at home for 20 bucks? Okay? Manufacturers are scared out of their minds of 3D printing, because once I can print a $300 pair of sneakers at home, why would I go to Foot Locker and buy it? Okay? Whatever Napster did for music or Netflix did for movies, 3D printing will revolutionize manufacturing. So why is this relevant, right? Why am I talking about guns? Well, Cody's gun was an open source gun. There's no IP protections, okay? But I think what we're going to see is something of a Baptist and bootlegger compromise on 3D printing. Do you know what the Baptists and the bootleggers are? Don't you have this concept? Okay. So during Prohibition, right, who are the biggest supporters of getting rid of alcohol? Well, on the one hand, you have the Baptists. These are the God-fearing people who said we have to get rid of booze. Any alcohol that touched these lips cannot touch mine. Remember this, right? We need to get rid of booze, right? Who else loves Prohibition? Bootleggers, right? Why? Because when you limit the supply of something, you can make it more expensive and you can raise the rates, right? So all the bootleggers with their speakeasies love Prohibition. They made the most money because their product become much more valuable. These sorts of coalitions happen all the time. We have one group that favors a change for, good reasons, and another group that favors it for selfish reasons. The same dynamics, I think, would actually play out with 3D printed guns. Because on the one hand, you have the gun control people. We need to stop guns. We need to stop guns, right? But then who's actually backing it? The manufacturers. The manufacturers have every interest in stopping this technology in its infancy. So imagine this, right? You may not know this, but if you ever tried to make a copy of a $100 bill on a really high-quality copy machine, you know what happens?
Yeah, because I've done it at work by accident.
Right.
It won't do it.
What does it do?
I think it gives it an error message.
Yeah. Did anyone know that? It was a Xerox, whatever?
Yeah, I have a color laser printer.
Yeah.
My secretary, she's used to copying all my deposits, and I had a cash deposit, and she just put it on the machine.
It won't do it?
Yeah.
So your devices, your copy machines, have a built-in sensor that if you try to print something that looks like a $100 bill, it won't do it. You probably had no idea about this, did you? What if a similar filter was built into your 3D printer that if you tried to print something that looked like a gun, it won't print? This is what manufacturers want. The same way that Treasury Department got the Xerox company to put a filter in. Manufacturers say, okay, if you print something that looks like a gun, you can't print it. Also, if you print something that looks like a pair of Nike sneakers, you can't print that either. If you print an iPad, you can't print that either, right? So the exact same principle that you put a filter into a Xerox machine would be put into your home 3D printer, okay? You would not be able to create stuff on your own printer at home that you purchased. This is a real threat, and I know people because there are already patents on this, right? There's already patents exist that says you can't print something that looks like a gun on a 3D printer. Well, if it's like a toy gun, you can't print it. This is a serious infringement on our freedom, a serious one, which you won't even see coming because it'll be voluntary by the 3D printing industry. As it were, the 3D printing industry does not like my client very much, and they refuse to sell him 3D printers because they know he'll make guns with them. Fine, he's found other ways of getting them. They have not stopped him from getting the gun, so he's managed just fine. The last approach, and the one that's actually the subject of litigation, involved export control laws. Anyone do any export control law? Oh, good. Okay, so you know about ITAR? Okay. ITAR is a series of regulations that were meant to prevent the spread of information. I'm sorry. ITAR was meant to stop the spread of arms to various countries we're not friendly with. And this was a series of regulations that emerged during the Cold War that were designed to prevent us from shipping any kind of weapons to enemies. So you can imagine during the 1970s that an American company should not be sending Stinger missiles to Afghanistan, right? That I think makes sense. The only problem is that over the last 20 or 30 years, the ITAR and the State Department that enforces it has expanded their jurisdiction greatly. Not only do they regulate actual munitions, actual arms, but they've started to regulate information, what they call technical data. So one example is cryptography. Cryptography, of course, is code that can make information secret. Secret from whom? The government, right? The government doesn't like information they can't get access to, so they've actually treated code used for cryptography as ITAR controlled. Even though all we're talking about is code, things that they write and they design, the government has said, you cannot export this without our permission, okay? That is a prior restraint of speech. And the government has basically admitted they're wrong on this, although it keeps going up and down on procedural nuances, right? But the case to watch is my case, of course. Defense Distributed versus U.S. Department of State. So let me give some background. In 2013, my client, Cody Wilson, posted on the internet files that can be used to make a 3D printed handgun, okay? And the State Department sent him this letter saying, hey, Department of State, we noticed that you're doing stuff. We noticed that you put some information on the internet. And look how they listed it, right? They basically said that you put a gun on the internet, that you put a pistol on the internet. How can you put a pistol onto the internet? Do you jam it into your computer? Do you throw it into a router? No. What they actually said was he put online technical data about how to make a gun. Now, the government always makes this very blurry. Is he actually exporting a gun, or is he exporting technical data? What's fascinating is the government has insisted that there's no difference between actually exporting a gun and sharing information about a gun. In fact, they said sending a gun overseas is functionally equivalent to putting information on the internet of how to make a gun. This is madness. This is absurdity, and we lost in the district court. But the most important element here is this sentence. All data should be removed from public access immediately. All data should be removed from public access immediately. This is what is called a prior restraint of speech. It is unconstitutional. You'll remember a case from the 1970s called the Pentagon Papers case. In this case, the New York Times sought to publish an article that had various information about troop movements in Vietnam. The government said, oh my God, if you publish this, we'll have a national security disaster. The Supreme Court said, no. Unless you have a specific credible threat of how the speech will hurt national security, you cannot censor this information. The government has had no specific reason that this can hurt others. They made up the speculation that maybe some foreign army can 3D print an entire army full of these single-shot pistols and assassinate a world leader. This is actually in the briefs. This is the threat they're worried about, that an army of foreign mercenaries armed with single-shot pistols can harm U.S. interests. This is absurd. This interest does not even come close to justifying what's necessary to have a prior restraint under the First Amendment, nor does it respect the Second Amendment to the Constitution. As I mentioned before, our case is currently on appeal to the Fifth Circuit. I am hopeful, indeed, hoping that we win, and hopefully we will get a victory for the Second Amendment, and the next time I come back here, I can brag about it. So I will stop here, and I welcome all of your questions, but thank you so much for your attention.
Can you be specific as to what district court?
We're in Austin.
No, not what district court, but what argument did they buy?
So, with respect to the district court's opinion, the district court's reasoned and learned opinion, he effectively accepted the argument that there's no difference between exporting the gun and exporting files about the gun. The court accepted that argument. I don't think that's particularly tenuous. I think it's not a justifiable distinction. I think the court was also under the impression that this was not a content-based restriction, If you've done some sort of intermediate scrutiny, there was actually a Supreme Court decision called Reed v. Town of Gilbert, which you haven't read about, you should, where the court effectively said if you have a law that has the effect of regulating speech, even if it's not on its face content restrictive, strict scrutiny applies. And I do not think the court accurately applied Reed v. Town of Gilbert, which was decided about a month before the case came out. So I think we have some pretty good arguments in the First and Second Amendment for our appeal. So thank you. We'll have our briefing schedule any day now. Hopefully we'll have our briefs in by sometime the end of November, and hopefully we'll have arguments at some point this spring. That's our hope. Judd?
Does the government, are there other examples of this where, I mean, I think that you're, like, you could take some chemical pharmaceuticals and make crystal meth or something like that. Is the government ban doing that sort of thing, using illegal products to make illegal products?
So let me give you an example, right? Shortly after the Oklahoma City bombing, everyone recalls that Timothy McVeigh used basically fertilizer to make an explosive. A member of Congress, it might have been Senator Biden, but I may be wrong about this, but don't quote me on this. I think it was Senator Biden, asked a representative from the DOJ, this was, the internet was new back then, can we censor information on the internet about how to make explosives out of fertilizer? And DOJ said, what are you, freaking crazy? Can we censor the internet to prevent people from sharing information on how to make bombs out of fertilizer? Of course not. We don't have a power to censor the internet. So the short answer, Judd, is no, they don't. The longer answer, though, involves classified information. So if you're talking about using an atomic bomb or some sort of classified secret, there are case law about restricting it. What makes our case, I think, very special is that the gun Cody sought to distribute was a handgun, a pistol. This was, as Heller said, the quintessential self-defense weapon. We're not talking about a machine gun. We're not talking about a missile launcher. We're not talking about an ICBM. This is a very simple handgun that's protecting both the First and Second Amendment.
Is the technology there to produce more sophisticated guns? I mean, in this case, just involves the stock market. Is the technology there?
Yes, yes. And the general response to that is it's not a particularly effective way of making guns, okay? We have a nation of 350 million guns. If I want to get a gun, I'll buy one illegally. The shorter answer is for the foreseeable future, it will always be cheaper to just buy one than to make one yourself. Also, you can't really mass produce a 3D printer because it's very slow in time consuming. The other issue is basically that even if we could use this technology for something more dangerous, that's not what we're doing here. And the sort of prior restraint they're imposing is far too broad. It covers far too much speech. Even if it's possible, right, that you can get something more dangerous, the means you're choosing is far too broad because it sweeps in protected speech as well. Yes, and just one note, the government has actually said that they can actually satisfy strict scrutiny. They've assumed in this case that they have such a strong compelling interest they can overcome strict scrutiny. We do not agree. Yes, sir.
The intellectual property argument is trade. If I understand, please clarify if I mistake this, but it seems that the code, that is speech, may be disseminated by the plaintiff into the internet. That does not violate any trademark or patent laws. However, were someone to use that to manufacture something that's violative of the patent, then that person is properly regulated.
Yes. So, for example, if I put online the blueprint to make a Glock 19 pistol, Glock will sue me for a lot of money. Cody, the gun he put online, was an open source model. There is no patent. It belongs to the commons. And in fact, Cody's mission is to share information with the world. That he's a very open source driven person, and there's no IP issues at all.
But I'm focusing on that which is IP protected.
Yes. Oh, if he put online handpins for a Smith & Wesson or a Glock, they could shut him down very quickly under IP laws. Yes, sir.
I'm not a lawyer, so I'm curious. Has he in fact, in addition to whatever code is necessary to guide, has he also put out text of a blueprint that's printable?
Yes.
Okay, and have they attempted to regulate those as well?
So what's interesting is the only documents the government's not regulated are the so-called text README files. If it's in text and it's a README file of how to use it, the government says you can distribute that. But the graphical representations of 3D CAD files, those the government said are protected.
But a PDF that simply shows the design.
So it's tricky with the 3D files. You wouldn't use a PDF because that's rasterized at 2 dimensions. You use a specific file.
It wouldn't be useful to create.
Well, it could be, and that's actually a close call. That's why when I showed you the image of the barrel, if I take the government's position seriously, that picture of the barrel, which is 2-dimensional but it demonstrates 3 dimensionals, could actually be protected under ITAR. And I think there's actually a compelling case that it could be, because you could actually use that as technical data to create a arms that's protected.
I'm not sure.
If you were to use that barrel picture, you could reverse engineer it and actually make a barrel out of it. Even if it's just 2-dimensional, you could. And because you could do that under the government's rules, I think that may be ITAR controlled. Oh, the code is definitely ITAR controlled. You're asking about a PDF of it, right? So just by giving you a PDF, a still shot of that barrel, I think that may also be ITAR controlled. It's not as clear, but I think the government could make the argument. And if I was advising my client, I would err on the side of safety and not put it online. Also, a lot of this is based on, we have a due process claim as well. There's almost no way of knowing in advance what is and is not ITAR controlled. You don't know when you're committing a felony. When Cody put these files on the internet, he didn't realize he was breaking the law. Until he got this letter from the State Department, he had no idea this law even existed. Because under what circumstances do Americans think I can't put a file on the internet of a thing I create? It was almost absurd. Yes, ma'am.
I just have a question about for someone to create one of these guns, they'd have to actually write the code. They'd have to write code, correct? From a picture, they would have to take the time to reverse engineer and write code.
Yes.
So, I mean, they could do that with anything. They could do it with a movie, right? And like,
Well,
freeze frame a picture. You know what I mean? Like, frame a picture.
this is an argument we make, right?
Netflix and
Right.
reverse engineer.
The government's definition of arms is so broad that any technical data of how to make it could be protected. So what if someone put online a marksman, right? How to make a scope for your rifle that can make your gun better. If an Olympic target shooter put that online, she'll be in violation of ITAR. Technically, people who make movies, and there's a scene in the movie where you demonstrate how to build a gun, that could be ITAR controlled. There's no limit here. There's actually no statutory authority as well. But the government has taken this. Now, Cody is the first person in the world, my client, who this has actually been enforced against. They've never actually enforced this law against anyone. And they've only enforced it against him since, even though he can, if you go online for 5 minutes, you can find Cody's files. Even though he took them down, they're all over the place. So they've only enforced it against him. And a little bit on the timing, Cody put this online, I think, within a few weeks of Sandy Hook. And I think there are a lot of people who are very, very upset about this. And basically the federal government said, oh, how can we find a way of stopping this? And they stumbled upon ITAR as the mechanism to do that. And you know, that's part of the background of the case as well. Yes, sir.
Who's making this equipment and how expensive is it?
Well, the 3D printers? Oh, you can go to Staples and buy one for about $1,000. They're not expensive. The one Cody has are a bit more sophisticated, maybe $5,000 or $10,000, but they're not that expensive. You can go to Staples or Best Buy and buy one right now. They're very easy to use. Other questions? Anything else? Yes, last question. Go for it.
So there's no standard that says a likelihood that the receiving party on this illegal export will actually make use.
It's a strict liability offense. It's a strict liability offense. The mere fact that a foreign national could access it. So one of the government's arguments is, well, you may not be able to put this on the internet, but you can just mail someone the file, mail them a thumb drive, right? You know, these are collaborative files which are meant to be shared. You can't mail thumb drives over UPS back and forth to U.S. persons. That's not a particularly effective means. But under the government's rationale, the entire internet is now off limits for sharing information because a non-U.S. person could come into contact with it.
Do they realize how utterly inefficient and generally kind of useless a one-shot plastic gun is?
Yeah.
They decided that.
Well, no, I mean, in the government's brief, they said that this gun could be used to assassinate a world leader, so the U.S. has an interest in suppressing it. There was an eye roll for the record, in case you couldn't see that.
Yeah.
A little bit of shade thrown. Any other questions?
That was a movie too, wasn't it?
Yep. Was it Point Blank or
Yeah.
Atlanta Fire? Yeah. Yeah. Again, people making foreign policy decisions based on movies, right? Yeah. Yeah, the Pope Francis security, you know, people came and throw stuff at them. Yes, sir?
With that rationale of 1 second, would it apply to any weapon at all? Every weapon would be potentially able to somebody?
Yes, as would a pencil that's sharp enough. Yes, you can assassinate someone very easily. I had a friend who was trying to walk to his office where the Pope was there, and he had a bell pepper in his suitcase, and they made him throw his bell pepper because it'd be a projectile to throw at the Pope.
They took away oranges, apples.
Oranges, apples. Yeah, no one throw fruit at them. Well, that's right for good reason. Do they still have a lockup cell in the basement of the stadium? Yeah.
For decades, pretty much every technology company in the United States has been inconvenienced by crypto regulations that any software that they make that uses high quality encryption can't be exported. And currently the authorities have not backed away from that despite decades of pressure.
And court cases which said it's unconstitutional. So the case called Bernstein, which I didn't mention, but a federal district court in California basically said that the State Department or Commerce at the time could not apply this to cryptography speech. But the case went up and down through procedural nuances that there was never a final judgment, and they've been running from that case for 20 years. Basically, the district court decision was vacated because of an en banc. It was complicated, and then they switched jurisdiction from Commerce to state just to get rid of the case, and then it never came back up because they never enforced it. So we are that case, though. They sent our client an enforcement letter. We are not backing down, so we will take this case as far as it will go to perhaps put the government through their paces and make them justify why they can censor this speech. Yes, sir.
One last question. Read somewhere in the paper, in the Middle East, these terrorists were using 3D printers to make IUD devices.
IUD or IED?
I don't know.
I can talk about Hobby Lobby if you want to talk about IUDs, but we can improvise explosive devices. Okay, so the question is this potentially a bad vehicle for the Second Amendment? To be honest, yeah, anytime you litigate a case at the Supreme Court, you always risk losing ground. Our sincere hope with this case, though, is that it prevents a chance that maybe, just maybe, some of the more liberal justices will like this one because it involves speech. It involves academic speech. And I'll give you a good example. If I'm a professor at a university and I'm doing research on, say, cryptography, do I really want to ask the government's permission before I can publish my papers online? In fact, there's actually a case, not a case, but they proposed rulemaking on this exact topic. There were thousands of comments made by academics saying this censors speech. So yes, there is a risk on the Second Amendment, although we are hopeful, and Alan Gurr is a much smarter lawyer than I'll ever be, that this gives a court a good chance to give a First Amendment ruling with the backdrop of the Second Amendment.
Gosh, thank you.
Thank you all so much.